Very good. Welcome, everyone. It is Monday, September 12th, 2022, and time for our regularly scheduled city council meeting. I ask the clerk to certify the meeting notice.
This meeting has been noticed in accordance with Idaho Code 74-204.
Thank you. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Here.
Councilmember Page.
Here. Thank you. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd stand and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item E is the consent agenda. We have 3 items.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, would clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move down to item F. F1 is a request for reconsideration of the denial of SUV FY 2021-0010 Petra Point subdivision. I believe the applicant. Oh, sorry. If you would join us and let the council know the basis for your request. You would give us your name and record.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Craig Kolchak. My address is 4839 Mountain View Drive, Boise, 83704. I'm here before you to request reconsideration. After talking to my client, I convinced him to do a few changes. In the packet that I sent you, I gave a elevation drawing of the new proposed design. That design incorporates a tandem garage, which would include and meet the requirements for the 2 covered parking spaces within each unit. It also gives an additional space during the parking, guest parking on the driveway portion of it. There's 20 feet of driveway in each one of those units. Plus, we still retain the same site plan with the additional 2 parking spaces we had originally put in there. So it gives you a total of 9 parking spaces. It meets all the parking requirements that were a consideration, and would like to have it reconsidered.
Okay, great. Council, just a little preamble before we get to questions. Stay with us, please. Mr. Okay.
Moving back and forth there.
Council's free to ask questions. I would encourage the council to determine if there's, you believe, reason to reconsider this, but as far as getting into the specific weeds of every aspect of this application, if the council decides to reconsider it, we would set a hearing date because we'd have to run another public hearing. Okay, so we'll set a date forward, in which case they'll present the actual site plan and validate what he's indicated tonight. So with that background, Councilmember Heller, you had a question?
I do have a question, Mr. Kolchak. You say that the site design itself has not changed. The footprint of the
Yeah, the footprint of each building is the same. The site plan that we had originally submitted meets all the design criteria for some open space requirements, the parking requirements for additional parking. And so rather than change that, what we did is we did a 3-story instead of a 2-story. We meet the requirements for the height requirements. And by having a 3-story unit with 2 livable spaces above it, we were able to put a tandem garage in there to still maintain the 7 units that we got originally on that. It meets the site plan footprint of each building, but now we've got a tandem garage with 2 covered parking spaces. additional guest parking in the driveway, and we still have the 2 parking spaces that we originally had when we submitted the site map.
Okay. Were there other documents submitted with this, Mr. Colchak?
Just that and a letter that stated, hey, what
Okay.
why we're doing this.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? Okay, matter is properly before the council. Council has the option to grant the reconsideration. If you do that, we'll set a hearing date. If I hear no action, then the matter will die.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I think one of the things that we talked about, the reason why it was denied before is because of the parking.
Yeah.
And so I think given the change in the schematic, we solved that issue. It says 2 covered parking, plus that we should move to reconsider the development.
Okay, we've got a motion to reconsider.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to reconsider this application. Any discussion on the motion?
Do we need to include a date certain, Mr. Mayor?
We do. If the motion passes, I think we'll take a second action on the date. I want to see if it passes first because I've got some things I need to inform the council about if we do that and the applicant. Any
Mr.
other
Mayor?
discussion? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I believe that the application as originally presented was justifiably denied. However, based on the limited information that we've been provided and the efforts to redraft the development to satisfy the parking requirements, I believe that it's reasonable, and I would like to see the complete packet to determine if this merits approval.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? You hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a subsequent motion on the date. This would require a hearing again. Mr. Kolchak, you'd need to complete a packet, regular packet with all the necessary documents back to our Development Services Department. The hearing date to meet the noticing requirements and to deal with our staff loading at the moment. Currently, Hannah's doing an application every day, and we're kind of really going strong. So we could hear it, soonest we could hear it would be October 24th. You'd have to have all your documents in by October 3rd. Otherwise, we can't meet the notice.
Correct. I'll talk to my client and see if they can make that requirement.
Okay, what I'm going to do is have them set the date tonight. If they can't make that requirement, if you need to extend it, it's fine. We can come back and revisit that. Or I can recommend the first meeting in November if that would be better.
Okay. My client's out of town, so I need to talk with them to see how we can coordinate. You know, we've got a design review application and the
yeah, this would come back to the council. It won't go to a design review function.
okay, cool.
It will come back.
I think we could make that happen.
Yeah.
The October date.
Okay. Well, I'm going to recommend that the council set October 24th as the date certain, and that would require all submittals no later than October 3rd. And if that isn't going to work, all you have to do is let us know, and we will bring the matter up again and extend it to whatever date you want. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, council, if you would, I'd like to a motion to extend this application, set the hearing date, I'm sorry, for this application for October 24th.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
before we make that motion, I would like to clarify, can we provide guidance that the materials be turned in by the 21st so that we're not receiving late dated materials the Sunday or Monday morning before the meeting?
Yes, as I indicated, everything would have to be in by October 3rd for an October 24th meeting. And we'll have the staff report done and out to you no later than the Wednesday before the meeting. Is that fair, Jenna? Okay, it's great.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, entertain an action to accomplish that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I move that we extend the application SUBFY 2021-0010 Petra Point subdivision for to a date certain of October 24th, 2022.
Second.
got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks, guys.
All righty. Next item. Constitution Week Proclamation. I'll read the proclamation into the record. Whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, the guardian of our liberties, embodies the principles of limited government in a republic dedicated to rule by law. And whereas September 17th, 2022 marks the 235th anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary, and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate the occasion. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, I, John Evans, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Garden City, Idaho, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week, and ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 by diligently protecting the freedoms that guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties, dated this 12th day of September, 2022. Item F3, elevate our everyday hero proclamation. Whereas we recognize our law enforcement officers, firefighters, EMS, dispatchers, corrections officers, coroners, chaplains, retired first responders, healthcare workers, clinicians, our military, our veterans, and their families as everyday heroes. And whereas these heroes put themselves in harm's way, protecting and serving our communities without hesitation. And whereas their selfless work can take a great toll on their physical and mental health. And whereas we recognize it is paramount for us as a community to surround our first responders, members of the military, our veterans and their families with love, respect, and the best resources available for them to maintain their mental health, wellness, and to build resilience. And whereas it has been shown that improving access to good mental health and wellness resources substantially affects their families' well-being, as well as the communities in which they serve. And whereas we honor and pay tribute to those who have been lost in the line of duty or died by suicide, as well as those who continue to keep the spirit of true heroism alive each day by serving our everyday heroes. Now, therefore, I, John Evans, Mayor of Garden City, Idaho, do hereby proclaim September 11th to be Elevate Everyday Heroes Day, dated this 12th day of September, 2022. We're doing this a day late, although yesterday was the day. We don't meet on Sundays. So that's the reason for the. Okay, we'll move to item G. This is ordinances, resolutions, and contracts. Item 1 there is the second reading of CPA FY 2022-0010. This is also our small cell ordinance. Mr. Waddles.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My memorandum on this matter starts on page 43 of your packet. The staff report from my interns on page 45 of your packet. The proposed ordinance that we're here on a second reading on is on page 52, and then the proposed, or there also has to be findings of fact, conclusions of law, and a decision. That's on page 59, and that's written in the alternative. If the council wants to approve this ordinance, ultimately there's some wording suggested for approval. There's also suggested wording for denial, and obviously that's all That's all up to the council's discretion. So we're here on the second reading. I can tell the council just a couple things, and then I will stand for questions. One of which is after the first reading, I think I was tasked with coming up with a definition of small cell facility. And so on page 56 of the packet, that is definitions of use. And we try to define small cell facility. And we also try to distinguish small cell facility from wireless communication facility. Wireless communication facility is currently in subsection 46 of the code. And that will remain, if you accept the proposal, it'll remain in wireless communication facility. What is that? Those are the macro towers. And so that subsection 46 would be for the macros. This new subsection, which is 49, would be for the small cell. So hopefully these definitions, I think these are appropriate. We did some research on it. So I feel pretty good about the definition of small cell facility. And I feel pretty good about the definition of wireless communication facility. They're two different things. One's a macro, one's a micro. And so I think we took care of that. That's really the only change from the first reading to the second reading. I can tell the council that this afternoon, Melinda Merrill sent an email to the mayor and council, and she represents Crown Castle, which is one of the companies in the industry. Our partners in this amendment we've reached out to everybody, but the people that reached back or the agencies, the industry that reached back is Verizon, AT&T, and Crown Castle. So they have slightly different business models. I think they do slightly different things. I think Melinda Merrill is present, as is Jason, who's a representative from Verizon. And what I wanted to tell the council about is I think Ms. Merrill or Jason with Verizon, they both would stand for any questions if the council has any, but she also had a submittal today. Mayor, would you like me to hand out the submittal to the council?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll find upstairs.
Thanks, Johnson.
And Crown Castle, they would like an addition to the code. And so I don't know if you have any questions for them or for Verizon. Staff's position is what they're representing is the law is accurate, but it's already codified in the federal regs. And so legally, whether the council would like it in there or not, I have no legal issue one way or another, other than it's in the federal regs. And I don't think the city has to codify everything that's in the federal regs. Federal regs trump the city code, but that's up to the council's discretion. That would be the only change that's not in the current version of the ordinance. Should the council want that minor change there, that would be an insignificant change. And again, from a legal standpoint, I don't have a problem with the ordinance. So with that, I would stand for the questions.
Mr. Wadhams, what if the federal regs change?
I'm sorry?
What if the federal regs change?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, what we're talking about is the shot clock. And what the shot clock is, mayor and council, is that if we cannot make this timeline, and I think it's either 60 days or 90 days. And that's from the time they submit an application to the time they get an approval or a denial. If for whatever reason staff, because of staff loading or whatever, cannot make that 60 days or 90 days, it's presumed or it's treated as granted. And so it's what you call a shot clock. Crown Council would like the shot clock right in the municipal code, which would be fine. I don't have a problem with that, but it's also in the federal regs. And so, but that's a good point, Mr. Mayor. If the federal regs change, then we'd have to go back in and change the municipal code. Or we can just be silent on it and everybody understands that we are bound by the federal regs.
In other types of circumstances, we default to the higher authority. And then if they change, we aren't burdened with doing an emergency ordinance of some kind. And unless I'm wrong, the rules are pretty specific in this area. And you know, if for some reason a year from now or 2 years from now, circumstances would change that language, then it would default to an obligation for us anyway.
Mayor and Council, that's right. The theme we've had on these code amendments is try to just put at the minimum amount that we need to legally, because of this law changes over there, then we don't have to go back in and amend our code. You know, so that's kind of what we've been trying to do. I'm here to give you a legal recommendation that it's not needed to be in there, but it also doesn't hurt anything either. So, so from a legal standpoint, I really don't have a strong opinion.
Mr. Wadhams, did Verizon or AT&T have an opinion?
So I just call him Jason B because I always butcher it.
Okay.
I'll let Bryson speak for themselves if you want to hear, and also Miss Merrill is here on behalf of Crown Castle,
Okay,
and I don't want to speak for them. So,
okay, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Wait, any other questions of Mr. Wadums? Council?
Sure.
Yes.
Mr. Wadums. In most contractual language that I've had the fortunate or unfortunate experience to participate in, there is pretty commonly a reference to conflict or governing law. And so in this instance, would reference to federal EFR as the governing law be appropriate?
That would be one, Mayor and Council Member Hurwitz, that would be one option.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Wadums? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Would you like to come up and answer my question for me? That would help me out.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Wadums. My name is Melinda Merrill. I'm a representative of Crown Castle, and what I'm going to do, so I don't waste too much of your time, if it's okay, I'd like to hand off to Scott Emerson, who is manager of planning and utilities for Crown Castle, and he's probably better situated to answer your question. Is that right?
That's fine.
Okay, he's on virtually.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, council members, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for your time. My name is Scott Emerson. I'm the permitting manager for Crown Castle for the state of Idaho, located at 1505 Westlake Avenue North, Suite 800, Seattle, Washington, 98109. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to offer comment on this agenda item. You know, as noted in the letter you have in front of you that was provided earlier today by Melinda Merrill, we would like to suggest that this minimal EFR language is added into the code. This also mirrors approximately the city of Boise EFR language, which they recently adopted the beginning of this year, end of last year. Specifically not in relation to the shot clock, you know, we can do tolling agreements, you know, as city staff is busy, but our concern is more about the modification of an existing small cell facility. Once a small cell is built, you know, on a utility pole or a city-owned light pole, in the future, if modifications need to happen to that existing small cell site, the EFR process is the permitting process that allows that to happen. So we would like that language to be added, you know, just for clarification, you know, moving forward with staff.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. Any questions, council? Mr. Verizon?
Walking better without my boot this time.
No, no, glad to see you're walking the dog.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, I highly recommend not tearing your Achilles ever. I highly recommend.
No.
So Jason Verdusco with Verizon, 12877 West McMillan Road, Boise, Idaho. Yeah, I mean, do you have a specific question?
No,
or?
just do you have any opinion one way or another on the added language is all I was going to ask. You guys have been very active with us from the get-go, and I just like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. No, I mean, yeah, I think Mr. Wadums has, you know, has covered a lot of it. I mean, he's, you know, become pretty well versed over this couple of years of doing this. You know, the reality is does it help? Not necessarily. Does it hurt? You know, not necessarily.
Okay.
So, you know, I completely understand your viewpoint in the sense of, you know, if federal law changes, then we have to change ours, right? And so essentially the eligible facilities request encapsulates the wireless facilities to begin with. So it's and since small cells are already in the code, it's already permitted across the board. They're permitted, so it's just a matter of following that process that's already there.
Great,
So.
thank you. Any questions, Councilman? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, this is a second reading. We can, Council, I would recommend you, if you authorize the second reading by title only. Before the clerk actually does that, you might prefer to have a little discussion on whether you'd like to see any changes at the third reading regarding this item or not. Mr. Wadhams will have a heads up on what to do. But before I do that, I want to have some comfort that we're going to have a second reading.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
For clarification, on page 61, item number 12, I want to verify there's been no public comment.
I have an answer, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Jorgensen. So we went back and looked at that. Somebody, I think it was Miss Merrill, somebody was here and I could find my reference, and they were here to stand for any questions. There just weren't any. So I don't think there was any public testimony on August 22nd. This will be updated to reflect whatever happens tonight. And we did have public testimony tonight. So we'll amend that and update that. But on August 22nd, I think it was Miss Merrill that was here either virtually or in person. And she was here if anybody had any questions, but nobody did. So.
Thank you. That confirms my recollection also.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Before we move forward with the second reading, I do believe that it's appropriate to include reference to the governing code or law of the federal EFR.
Okay. Any other opinions?
Mr. Mayor, that's my preference as well.
Okay.
And I.
Okay. Okay. So I'd entertain an action to read ordinance CPA FY 2022-0010 for a second reading and instruct Mr. Wadhams to include the Crown Castle recommended language for the third reading.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I move that we have the clerk read CPA FY 2022-0010 by title only for the second reading, and that for the third reading we are prepared to reference federal law EFR as it relates to the shot clock provision.
I would second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? You're none, the clerk read the call roll.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Hiller?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Second reading CPA FY 2022-0010 for ordinance 10-06-19, an ordinance of the city of Garden City, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, amending Garden City Code Title 8 Development Code, Chapter 2 Base Zoning District Regulations, Article B Base Zoning District Provisions, Section 2 Allowed Uses, Article C Land Use Provisions, adding Section 49 Small Cell Facilities, Chapter 6 Administration, Article A General Provisions, Section 2 Duties and Authority, Section 4 Required Application Information, and Chapter 7 References, Article A Definitions, Section 1 Definition of Uses, by amending the language to include provisions for small cells, providing severability, repealing conflicting city code provisions, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Very good, thank you. Next item G3, This is a resolution 1126. I'm sorry. I jumped one. G2, this is a third reading. This was continued from 8/22/2022 regarding the consultant. This is the final reading on this ordinance. Mr. Wadhams, would you brief us on the amendments?
Yes, Mayor and Council, I want to reference a couple things in my memorandum, and I want to reference a couple things that are in the ordinance. So first, regarding my memorandum, that starts on page 65 of your packet. And I want to point the Mayor and Council specifically to the bottom of page 66. And you know, I just go in here and I detail that there's three different ways, and this is from the American Planning Association. There's three different ways to handle design review. And what the council has decided to do is switch it to the administrative model. And so that's what this is. This is recognized as an administrative model. We're not recreating the wheel or doing anything like that. This is right out of the American Planning Association book, and it's called an administrative model. So at the last meeting, I had some homework to do. The council instructed me to do some things, and I've done that. And I'd like to go over that now. One of the things that we talked about is standing and so on and so forth. And before I get to standing, I want to make sure that the council understands, and it's on page 68, my memo in the packet on page 68, how we're able to get away from open meetings by doing this. And the reason why we can get away, or not get away, but why it doesn't fall under open meetings is because it's not going to be a governing body. As soon as there's a governing body involved, that triggers the open meeting law. And a governing body is right in Idaho code. It says a governing body consists of at least two members who have the authority to make a decision or recommendations, and are also required to make its decision by majority vote at which a quorum is present. And we're not going to do that. I mean, if the council decides to have a third reading, we're switching to the administrative model where there will not be open meetings with the consultant. It'll be, the consultant is not going to be a governing body. And as long as the consultant does not turn into a governing body, we are not going to have any open meeting issues. So, but I just wanted to make a record that that's a pretty important distinction of when open meeting laws apply and when open meeting laws do not apply. It all boils down to whether it's a governing body or not. And if we do the consultants as recommended and as anticipated, we won't have any open meeting issues. So my homework, I want to talk, if we could go to the actual ordinance now. And I'd like to start on page 91 of your packet, please. On page 91, I just wanted to point out a couple things. So two things on page 91, it's also page 12 of the ordinance. One thing I changed from the second reading is I specifically say in here, this is not going to be a governing body. I don't want there to be any open meeting issues or allegations of open meeting violations. So I just put right in there that this is not a governing body. Open meeting laws do not apply. Another thing that was changed between the second reading and the third reading is this table 86A1. It starts on page 91 of your packet. And what we sat back down with staff, we sat back down with development services, and we just wanted to clarify when the consultant is triggered. And so we added it right here on this table, that the consultant is triggered for comprehensive plan amendments, for development code amendments, for planned unit development, for preliminary plat, and with the final combined, with the signs master plan or design review, and for the specific area plan. That's when the consultant is going to be used in, and we thought that it should just be real clear when the consultant's going to be used. If you go to page 99 of your packet, please. One of the issues, one of my tasks from the last meeting is it said when it's unclear, and you know, the comment was it's not real clear what unclear means. And so now, if I could reference you to 86A6D, we switched it. It says that, let's see here, the planning official may refer to any administrative application to the Planning and Zoning Commission or the design review consultant for any administrative application governed under Chapter 4 of this title when staff has a question as to whether applicable standards or purposes have been met. And so hopefully that's to the council's satisfaction that you know, that's what we meant by unclear. So if I could point you to please 103 of the packet. Another issue that comes up is standing. What does standing mean? When do people have the right to appeal, so on and so forth? And I think my task was to clarify that for this third reading. And so that's what I've tried to do. Now it says you can appeal if you have standing under LUPA or the Local Land Use Planning Act and you've testified. And that could be either in writing or verbally. So if you have standing under LUPA and you've testified, then you can appeal. And so with staff, we've tried to make that real clear. And so hopefully there's no further questions on that. Thing that we did on page 109 is we added a definition of consultation. What is a consultation? We thought we should define these things. So the only other change that I wanted to comment on right now is that consultation is a meeting or correspondence with the design review consultant and the applicant, but it's not a governing body. I added that in there, but it's a meeting or correspondence with the consultant. And so we put a definition in there for that. And we added a couple other definitions, hopefully just to clarify the whole process. So I think hopefully I've done my homework and done what I was tasked to do. With that, I stand for questions. Thank you.
Mr. Wadhams, for those that may not know the acronym LUPA.
Local Land Use Planning Act, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I just thought I'd get that on the record.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go Councilmember Page, and then we'll come over here.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Wadhams, for just taking the time to address those areas that were confusing or ambiguous from our last reading. I feel more comfortable with the document before us. Thank you.
Council President, my pleasure.
Thank you, Councilmember Jacobs.
Mr. Wadhams, I just had a quick question on the professional services agreement. I didn't see anything in terms of what the expectation was with the turnaround time. We talked about that and I didn't.
Yes.
Either I'm missing it or I missed over it of what, because a lot of this was to speed things along as well.
Right. And so I'm happy, Mayor and Council Member Jacobs, I'm happy to talk about that now or on the next agenda item. We did hopefully address your concern on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so regarding the actual ordinance, we made sure, and I think the wording, and I could reference it here in a minute, but what we said is that your consultation must be timely as defined by resolution. So we're not saying in the ordinance how soon you get your consultation. We're referencing the resolution, and then the resolution tells you when you're going to get your consultation. But
does that need to be in the service agreement with the actual consultant?
Yes. Yeah, and that's the next thing on the agenda. Councilmember.
Jumping ahead. Sorry.
It's okay. Hopefully we addressed it to your satisfaction. Oh, Ms. Thornborough.
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs. One thing that I would like to point out as clarification that exists in code is that there's 30 days that staff has already embedded in code to start moving an application along, as the design review consultant either is going to be reviewing something as part of a public hearing process, or as a staff report, that 30 days would be governed within that time frame.
So they can be considered staff, so to speak. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Jorgensen.
Mr. Wadhams, I want to echo the President of Council's comments. I really appreciate all the effort and the work. I know it was a big lift, but I'm very pleased with the result. I do have a question, and this is just I think probably an education for me. On page 68, in the second paragraph, last sentence, Development Services Director generally follows the standards for a hearing examiner. I'm not used to hearing examiner. Is that?
Mayor and Councilmember Jorgensen, a hearing examiner is something that it doesn't exactly fit, but it has the requirements of what an examiner would do and the timelines needed and the process and so on and so forth. And while this is not a hearing examiner, it's a consultant, it feels similar to me. So I think we'd be safe if we just followed LUPA regarding hearing examiners.
Great. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Mayor, I also forgot one more thing I need to talk about. If I could just have another 2 minutes of everybody's time. There has been a recent development that is no big deal, but I need to let you know about it, I think. Although perhaps it's just a clerical issue, but one thing that was missed, and so what I'm going to ask for is a motion to read this for a third reading as amended, because what I have right here is one slight amendment and it's all in yellow. Maybe I'll explain it before I hand it out. What happened was sometime back, there was a code amendment for a specific area plan. And so that was, so I think some of you will remember when we did the specific area plan. Staff was not codifying things right away. Staff was kind of waiting until there were several code amendments, sending them all up to the codifier at the same time to try to save money, which is fine. But because it wasn't codified, that code amendment was initially missed. So I caught it at the last minute. And so all this is to say that right now, the specific area plan talks about a design review committee. It needs to be changed to design review consultant. So that's all it is. Page 30 of what I'm handing right now would be the only change. It's just to address the specific area.
Thanks, Charles.
So what the change is what's highlighted in the
Page 29, actually.
Oh, page 29. And you can see the only change is changing it from committee to consultant. And I'm glad I caught it. And now we're going to be codifying things quicker.
Good catch.
For the poor legal intern.
Mr. Robbins, are there only 2 instances?
The only substantive issue is on page 29, Councilmember Jorgensen. The rest are just in the title and in the summary.
Gotcha.
So I apologize for that, but
29 is the bill.
Okay, are there any questions of Mr. Wadhams? Any further questions?
Mr. Waddams.
Yes, I'm not Mr. Wadhams. Go ahead, council member.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Waddams, are you recommending in the motion that we adopt and publish after the third reading?
Mayor, Council President.
As amended?
Yes, as amended. By title only.
I'd really prefer to read these 30 pages.
That is the recommendation.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, the matter is before the council. That's not a page.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think it's fine.
I move that we have Madam Clerk read ordinance 1026-22 by title only for the third reading and then adopt and publish.
As amended.
As amended. Thank you.
2 motions.
Do we need 2 motions?
We usually do 2 motions.
Yeah. Strike that. I won't modify the motion. I move that we have Madam Clerk read ordinance 1026-22 as amended by title only for the third reading.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call roll.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes.
Third reading ordinance 1026-22, an ordinance of the city of Garden City, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, amending or repealing Garden City Code Title 8, Development Code, Chapter 2, Base Zoning District Regulations, Article C, Land Use Provisions, Section 13, Drive-Through Establishments, Section 29, Mortuary, Section 46, Wireless Communication Facility, Chapter 4, Design and Development Regulations, Article A, General Provisions, Section 3, Fences and Walls, Section 9, Waterways, Article B, Design Provisions for residential structures, Section 3, single family and 2 family attached and detached residential dwelling units. Article C, design provisions for non-residential structures. Section 5, prohibitions. Article D, parking and off-street loading provisions. Section 3, parking design and improvement standards. Article F, design provisions. Section 4, permit required. Section 12, regulations for specific sign categories. Section 15, non-conforming signs. Chapter 5, land division regulations. Article C, special development provisions. Section 5, non-residential subdivisions. Chapter 6, administration. Article A, general provisions. Section 2, duties and authority. Section 3, general application process. Section 4, required application information. Section 5, administrative process with notice. Section 6, administrative process without notice. Section 7, public hearing process. Section 9, appeals and city council reviews. Article B, specific provisions. Section 3, design review committee. Section 5, development code amendment, section 8, minor planned unit development, and chapter 7 references, article A, definitions, section 2, definitions of terms, repealing all ordinances or parts thereof to the extent they conflict with this ordinance, providing all other ordinances included in the official code are still in effect, notwithstanding some provisions thereof being eliminated, repealing any other ordinance, creating or regulating the design review committee, providing for severability, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Now, Councilmember Page.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we adopt and publish ordinance 1026.
Did we just vote on that? No, we did. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted you. I hit my mind.
I move that we adopt and publish ordinance 1026-22 as amended.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, and then there's the findings of fact, conclusions, law, and decision. Was the council approving that as well? Or because right now it's in the alternative.
Okay, Councilmember Page, can you clarify that?
Yes, let's actually just strike the last motion, and if it's okay, and I'll begin from anew. Is that the best?
Mayor, council member, council president Page, 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other.
We could do a new motion.
Mr. Mayor, it was
It's your pleasure.
Mr. Mayor, it was my intention to include the findings of facts and conclusions of law in that motion. If any council member that changes anything council member's decision, please say so.
Is that consistent with the second? We seconded it.
Councilmember Heller.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let the record reflect the intent of the motion. With no objection, the findings and the affirmative will be included as
My
part of the
apologies to
action.
my colleagues.
Yes.
None needed.
Next item G3. This is a resolution, resolution 1126-22. Approving the design review consultant services agreement. Mr. Wadhams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just stay seated on this one. I think it'll only take a minute, but that starts on page 121 of your packet with the resolution, and then the actual agreement that we're proposing is on page 122 of the agreement. I will tell the council that I'm going to ask that the last provision be stricken. I've looked at this multiple times, but on 125 of your packet, it has an allocation of risk section, and I don't love it. And I don't think we need it. And so I'm just going to request that that be stricken. What it says is that the consultants, the only risk that the consultant would have is whatever the fees were for his services rendered, which limits their risk to sometimes $50 or something. And I think that's inconsistent with the indemnification cost. So I just suggest that that be stricken. And then with that, I'd recommend that it be approved and passed. To Council Member Jacobs' point, if you look on page 122, it says that the applications will be reviewed in a timely and efficient manner. And it also says that, and one thing that I don't know if Ms. Thornborough would like to comment or not, but number 5 there at the bottom of this page 122, it says the written recommendations are going to be submitted prior to the consultation, which I initially thought it should be after the consultation, but Ms. Thornborough has a compelling reason for why it should be before the consultation. So that I think the intent is to try to speed the process along.
Mayor, members of the council, it was actually the design review consultant, one of the potential consultants that suggested if applicants have their comments, if they review the materials and provide comments ahead of the consultation, that the meeting might be more efficient and the applicant might have ways to address items that have come up prior to the consultation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Ms. Thornborough, so who would they be reviewing the findings with?
Mayor, Councilmember Jorgensen, they would be reviewing, so the recommendations or the consultations, the items of discussion would be matters that they would identify and submit to the applicant for the consultation.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Wadums, anything else from you?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Resolution 1126-22 is before the council.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution 1126-22 with the provision of item L, allocation of risk, stricken from the agreement as it's in conflict with the indemnification clause.
Okay. Got a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call roll.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
Thank you. Next item, item G4, motion to adopt and publish ordinance 1024-22. This is the repeal of the Cyril Mitchell overlay. Mr. Wadums.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a little homework to do on this one, and I think I got it right. I think I got 100%. If I could point the council to page 143 of your packet. There were just a couple tweaks that the council wanted, and so that there was a third reading as amended, and they are now in there. There's 3 shall be compatible with, and that was the recommendation from last time. And there was also a recommendation from Ms. Thornborough to add building form in 6. So you have shall be compatible with in 3, 4, and 8. And then you have the building form addition on 6. And I'd request a motion to adopt and publish. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Wadums?
This is. I did have a question for Mr. Stumber on before we have the third reading, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs.
Ms. Stumber, just before we have the third reading and adopt and publish, I still get a lot of feedback from constituents about just questions about the repeal of the overlay district. And so I just want to clarify some of the points, because I think in my conversations with them, I want to reassure them of why we're doing this. And so a couple, 3 or 4 questions. My understanding is the current base code allows the development of the one-to-one live work development that is currently in the overlay. And so there's redundancy there that under current base code, they can have the one-to-one ratio.
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, certainly if somebody wanted to live and work, there are avenues available within base codes, depending on the zoning that is the base zoning code to move forward with that.
The other question I had is the district is still listed in the comprehensive plan. One of the concerns I think was that we would, the branding and things like that, we reassured everybody that would stay in place. And so I want to reassure people that this real live work is still in the comprehensive plan. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, the Cyril Mitchell Live Work Create district is still in the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. And then the final question I have is, the other question we get a lot about is parking and things like that. If someone was going to develop in that district, they would still be able to apply for any waivers on parking similar to any other development. And then we're also in the process of looking at our entire parking code rewrite. And so that would preclude anybody from asking for similar parking waivers that are in the current overlay. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Jacobs, now any project, if it that would be in that where that district was, the base parking regulations do apply. And
thank
you're
you.
correct, the city is embarking upon reviewing the parking standards as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, wait, yes, Councilmember Hill.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Thornbow, tell us again what the comprehensive plan says. Does it say a live, work, create district or overlay district?
Mayor, Councilmember Heller, it would not say overlay. I can look up the exact wording. But the comprehensive plan would not contemplate an overlay per se.
Yep. So that you reassure us that that won't be the case in the comprehensive plan. Okay, thank you.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Okay, what's the pleasure of the
Thank
council? We've had the third reading. It's now, the decision is whether to adopt and publish.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I move that we adopt and publish ordinance 1024-22.
Second.
got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call roll.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page,
Yes.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs.
Yes.
Thank you. Item G5, this is a public hearing item. Is everybody all right? Anybody need a break? Okay, we'll push ahead. Item G5, this is a public hearing, SUB FY 2022-0006. This is a combined preliminary final plat application. Is the applicant with us? Yes, sir. Please join us. Welcome. Thank you for hanging in there.
Yeah, no
Do a
worries.
lot of reading tonight. Welcome. If you would give us your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Clint Hansen, 231 East 5th Street in Meridian, Idaho, 83642. I represent
would you spell your last name for us?
Hansen, Hansen.
Hansen, I'm sorry. Old ears here, sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I represent the owners of the property for this project, and their desire is to simply do a minor land division in a sense. They inherited the property from their mother years ago, have lived on the property. It was 2 separate addresses and 2 separate dwellings for this time, and this is simply a matter of trying to clean up the property to make it comply with the subdivision ordinance or legal parcel divisions. And since the city doesn't have a simple lot split procedure that they could go through, they recommended we do the combined preliminary and final plat. Design review and the Planning and Zoning Commission have all worked with us extensively and recommend approval with the conditions listed, and we're in agreement with those conditions. Max Brown is also on Zoom. He's out of town. He also has been working with staff. He's the husband of Anna Pineda, that is one of the owners as well. If you have any additional questions that I might not be able to answer with the application. But.
Thank you. Are there questions, council? Pretty straightforward. You are in agreement with the conditions?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. The process is we'll have your presentation, which we just had. I'll have Ms. Thornborough respond on behalf of the city, and then I'll open the public hearing.
Okay.
And anyone that wants to testify may, and then if there's other testimony, I'll invite you back to wrap up.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Yep.
Okay, very good. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. And this is a relatively one of the more straightforward subdivisions that has come before the city, and that it's really akin to a lot split. And so as Mr. Hansen had noted, the applicants have been living there long term, and this application is really to create the property lines and how the property is in use. The conditions for the most part are conditioned to trigger redevelopment upon redevelopment. So any improvements would be triggered upon redevelopment. The one exception is during subdivision. The code requires that a subdivision install pressurized irrigation system. However, the city engineer does have some latitude in requiring that based on some certain conditions. Those are found on page 4 of the staff report, and the staff report starts on page 155. So that would be 159 of the packet. And there are two different processes, or not processes, criteria that could be reviewed by the city engineer to grant waivers for that pressurized irrigation requirement. Other than that, the applicant is well on their way to achieving full code compliance already. If you look at some of the discussion previously, as this has gone through the process, there were some requirements, some property, real property documentation, et cetera, that the city already has. And so with that, I stand for any questions.
Any questions of Ms. Thornberry? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing now on SUB FY 2022-0006. Councilmember Page, is anybody signed up? Can you see any? Can't see the sign up sheet. Great. Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, we don't have anyone in the room that is signed up to testify. Do we have anyone that's joined us by Zoom call? Okay. Let the record reflect there's been no one indicate an interest in testifying. Mr. Hanson, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share? Okay. Thank you. With that, we'll close the public hearing and turn it to the council for action.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I move that we approve SUB FY 2022-0006 Canada subdivision.
Second.
Is the motion and second include the findings, fact, and conclusions of law?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, including the findings, facts, and conclusions of the law.
Say,
been late yet.
Same with the second.
Okay, thank you very much. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the clerk call roll.
Councilmember Page?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs?
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. The item is approved. Again, thank you for your patience and it's kind of a roll of the dice on the order of things that come in. So anyway, you saw your government at work tonight. I hope you're not too discouraged. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Item G6, this is authorizing me to enter into a purchase agreement for logic controller for well 10. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Is Colin here? Oh, sorry.
No. This is we have 9 operating wells, and well 10 is that the one in Riverside? Anyway,
It's a big.
in the summer we need all of them, so please. Anyway,
Mayor, the current controllers end of life, or they don't, or does it just need to be normal main wear and tear?
it would be a failure.
End of life, yeah.
End of life.
Yeah, end of life. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
are we opening up discussion?
Sure.
So my question is, if this is end of life, what happens, if I'm interpreting this correctly, what happens the next cycle when we can't get this PCL?
Well, we have a more of a major rebuild. So there's when compatible components aren't there, then we have a major rebuild of a facility.
So do we have a forecast? I mean, 21 years is pretty good, but I suspect this won't last that long because things don't last as long as they used to.
We anticipate in our maintenance lines in our enterprise fund that we're going to have some big ticket items every year because of the number of wells we have, the number of lift stations we have. We have some significant maintenance issues that come up every year. We anticipate most of that. If something that we didn't anticipate and couldn't cover in our normal maintenance, that's why we carry a fund balance too. So we have a backup, some backup revenue in our budget. In the public works that we carry as a reserve. And if we exceed that, which would be extraordinary, we have the general fund balance as a double backup. But you can count on a major well rehab being well into the six figures. So it's just
preventive maintenance.
Yeah, you take care of them, and we've done things over the years to hedge for short-term capabilities when we lose if we lose one of our major facilities, and sitting over there on 38th Street. I'm sorry, 46th Street, which is our well, which is our above ground storage.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
One last question, and I apologize for putting you on the spot because
it's all right.
Mr. Schmidt usually.
I know.
Do you know, was a GPO purchased, or usually he includes the 3 bids that were used, or is this a sole source? If
the bids weren't included, it was a sole source.
Okay.
And we run into that with specialized equipment sometimes. Lisa, do you have more on that?
And in this, it's under 50,000.
Yeah.
So it's, the bids were not required.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. And I don't see it here. Are you aware of any warranty that's written or otherwise offered on this amount?
I'm not aware. Sorry.
You thought this was going to be easy.
No, well, I did. I just think over time, when the staff says we need to do something with one of these facilities, we really need to do something with one of these facilities. And they're very familiar with the sourcing and the component quality and all of those sorts of things, because they're familiar with this equipment. You know, it all has to be compatible with our remote controlling programming and all kinds of things that I don't understand probably.
Just an app.
Yeah.
That's an app for that.
Yeah, but
and Mr. Mayor, I let me say for the record, I'm not trying to delay this or anything. I just you know, want to be sure that we're exercising stewardship with our money.
I would be surprised if a new component doesn't have a warranty. I just haven't physically seen that, so that's why I answered I don't know. I haven't seen that. And the relationship with our vendors, typically they have a vested interest in taking care of someone who's got 9 wells, and most of them have similar kinds of equipment.
Is this our preferred vendor? Yes. In past.
Yes.
With past transactions.
Yes. Councilmember Page. This is a vendor we use regularly.
Yeah. So I should have prefaced all my comments with, this is what I think I know. So with that caveat,
Mayor, I move that we approve the purchase agreement with Custom Electric for the purchase of programmable logic controller for well 10 in the amount not to exceed $30,470.
Second.
a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Jorgensen, any discussion?
No, sir.
Okay. Hearing none, the clerk call the roll.
Councilmember Heller,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacobs,
Yes.
Councilmember Jorgensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Page.
Yes.
Great, thank you. That concludes the business on our agenda tonight. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I move that we adjourn the regular council meeting.
And I would second.
got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We stand adjourned.